There's a great podcast I'm listening to that I want to share with you before today's episode. It's called Reframables. Two very different sisters, one artist, entrepreneur, one teacher, philosopher, worked through some of their lives' biggest hurdles through conversations with artists, thinkers, and creators who are doing that kind of work in the world. This sister duo, Natalie and Rebecca Davey, aim to better themselves and the world they love through art, philosophy, humor, and lived experience. Their conversations with each other and their guests are vulnerable, honest, and wise. Every episode, they share bite-sized reframables for listeners to chew on for the rest of the week. At the end of this episode, I'll include the trailer to the show. You can find reframables wherever you listen to podcasts and at their website, seriesproductions.ca/reframables. Do you want to change the world? So do I. On this show, we meet artists whose work is doing just that. Welcome to Art Heals All Wounds. I'm your host, Pam Uzel.
Don't expect to understand my family. You'll have better luck comprehending the history of the Middle East or a Rubik's Cube. The answers there may not be formal or finite, but they at least exist. When it comes to my family, there are a few answers. We live in northern San Diego County, a casually affluent burn zone decorated by waves of red tile roofs. Here people think they can beat the inevitable by waving magic wands. Money, image, designer dogs. Sometimes it works. Sometimes they wind up with their homes reduced to ashes. My parents have charm. They use it as a strategy, a way to beat back the flames. A grin can flash into something darker or remain in sunshine. You never know.
When we're children, our families are our world. We learn how to act in that world, how to speak, when not to speak, how to read swift changes of expressions on faces or tones in a voice. We watch body language, hoping to predict when the next shift in the weather is coming. Then we take all that we've learned and bring it along with us and find that those family survival skills are exactly what's causing unhappiness in our lives. You heard Allison Landa reading from her memoir, Bearded Lady. We talk with Allison today about things she brought from her family and how she finally left them behind in order to love, be loved, and thrive. Allison Landa is a teacher, coach, and writer. She writes about what matters with honesty and authenticity. Her work is sometimes edgy, sometimes dark, sometimes humorous, all in the service of sharing the truths from her lived experience. Her memoir, Bearded Lady, just became available, and she joins me on this episode to talk about the ways that this story about family, secrecy, and shame are specific to her life but hold universal truths for all readers. Hi, Allison. Welcome to Art Heals All Wounds. Could you start by introducing yourself, telling us who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to be here, Pam. Thank you. I am a memoirist and fiction writer living in Berkeley, California, and my book, Bearded Lady, is coming out from Woodhull Press on October 4th.
I know, and I'm so excited to talk about your book with you. You let me read a copy of it, and I'm wondering if you can just talk about a little bit about what this book is about.
Well, it's really about what makes you feel weird in the world. It's about what makes you feel odd when you walk in a room. The title is obviously very specific. I have something called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which creates dark, obvious facial hair, and in addition to other symptoms. And while I don't have it anymore, I did as a child. I was diagnosed at 10, but not treated until I was 30. So this story traces that arc of discovery and figuring out how to take care of myself and actually implementing it to do it. And that's sort of the foreground. But the background, as I said, the context is really about, what makes you feel odd, what makes you feel like an outsider in a way.
Yes, and one thing I loved about this book is that it was really surprising to me. When you first told me about it, I did feel like it would be focused very much on maybe, medical mishaps where you were misdiagnosed or mistreated in some way. And when I read it, I was really surprised in a delighted way that it's really about family, or that's what I took away from it, and how you inherited a disease genetically, but we inherit so many things from our families. And one of the themes of your book that I really appreciated was the shame and secrecy around your diagnosis.
Absolutely. Shame and secrecy, I think, underpins so much in this world. And there's a lot of that. And again, that's a universal theme, I think. I think that that's something that I'm not sure anybody couldn't relate to that. So that's something I was really trying to get at. And I love that you nailed it. You zeroed in on it.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about both your parents are very significant in this story, but the person who really asked you in a way to hide your condition and sort of coached you on how to hide your condition was your mom. Can you talk about the role of your mom in this story?
Well, my mother is very much a driving factor in the sense that she did not only coach me on how to hide, but also how to operate in the world with the condition that I had without actually treating it. I think she had these expectations of me that I would be able to do that, that I would be able to live in the world as I was without that support and that treatment and that healing. Now, I should stop and say that my mother, like any other person, is neither villain nor victim. I mean, she's just a person, but she definitely, well, she suffers from it herself, but much less severely. So she sort of knew how to be in the world. And I think thought she was doing me a favor, which is very ironic. Reading the book, it doesn't seem like much of a favor, but that's what I think she thought she was doing.
Right. Can you expand on that? Like, what do you mean when you say you think that she thought she was doing you a favor?
I think that she felt as though this was something I was going to have to live with. And I don't think she had much interest in treating me. And the reason that I say that is I think that my parents were very wrapped up in a dysfunctional marriage, and that really occupied a lot of their time. I guess fighting takes up a lot of time. So it really occupied a lot of their time. And I think that she wasn't interested in doing that. Now, I should also say that I am the mother of an autistic son, and I understand how difficult it is with interventions and medical issues and all. I get it. But I think that she felt as though she could just show me how to handle it, how to manage it, not to get to the deeper, more significant diagnosis, but just here's how you shave, here's how you cover it up, this is what you do. And we lived in a community that very much supported that sort of imagistic behavior.
Right. And if I am recalling correctly, she never told you that she had it. You figured that out
I did.
after a certain time of like, oh, she's also doing the same thing that I'm doing.
Exactly. I heard my parents talking about it one night and I thought, my God, I'm not alone. It was almost this revelation of she has it too. And it was kind of, I won't say liberating, but I won't not say liberating. It was kind of interesting. I was like, wow, okay, you suffer with this too. But then on the heels of that was the thought of, well, but then you should understand. You should understand
Mm.
what it's like. You should understand how it feels. And in reality, she did and she does. But I think she is scared of going to that deeper level. Like, what's wrong with my daughter? And to this day, I should
Mm.
say we haven't really talked about it.
Has she read your book?
She's read part of it, and it's very interesting because I put an excerpt on Facebook forgetting that she and I were Facebook friends. And I remember sitting in a cafe in Oakland, and my phone rang, and it was my mom, and she was crying, and she said, "It's beautiful. It's beautiful."
Oh,
And it just, I felt like that was really generous of her to say that. I mean, she definitely read some things that were probably hard to read about herself, but she really liked it. That said, she has not read the whole book yet.
wow. That's kind of amazing though, that was the response that she gave to you. That's a beautiful, at least, there's some sense there that she is putting you as her daughter before her own feelings, which seems to be a very different way of being than maybe some of the times when you were younger.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think she had a very hard time putting me before herself. That was very,
Right.
very challenging. And her reaction to the excerpt that she read, I think it was very generous and very gracious. And it was also very natural. I mean, she called me up and with the tears flowing. I should say my mother is a crier. It's what she does. But she really said, I love it. It's beautiful. I really, really liked it.
Oh,
So I kind of wonder how she'll feel about reading the entire thing. And the funny thing is that I will be seeing her. I'll be in San Diego right before the book comes out. So it's kind of an interesting bit of timing there.
right, right. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about both your character in the book, which is you, but you were diagnosed at 10. You were diagnosed because kids were making fun of you. And then there's immediately this idea of this is going to be your secret and you can hide this. But I'm wondering how that shaped you, the rest of your adolescence and teenage years. And then as a young adult, how did this idea that you couldn't trust anyone with this truth about yourself, how did that shape your life?
That's a great question. It made me enter into the world with cynicism and concern and fear. And I really, every time I walked into a room, I thought, who's looking at me? Who sees it? Who's going to say something? Now, most people never did. I would say the great majority of people who I ran into never said a word about it. Either they saw it and decided I'm not going to make her uncomfortable, or they looked past it. But I was very cynical and very scared. And I think what that meant was that I put a lot of boundaries up. And I was
Mm.
very, very worried about being seen for who I was. That scared the hell out of me.
Right. And you even had these two very, very close female friends, and they often expressed concern and wanted you to open up to them. But there was a sense, too, that they were concerned about a physical condition, but then they were just concerned about you in general. But because of this secrecy, you really never could take some of the support that they were offering.
Exactly. It was very, very hard for me to think that they saw me that way as somebody who needed caretaking and support. I never wanted to be seen as somebody who needed anything. That was a really important thing for me. I wanted to operate on my own. I wanted to act independently. I wanted to be seen as somebody who was fine. I was fine. I was fine. I was always fine. And anytime anybody, including them, expressed concern, it scared me because I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to think that they saw it. I didn't want to give words to it. I didn't want to admit what everybody knew, which was that I had a condition. As a woman
Mm.
with a beard, that's not only is it not socially acceptable, but it's indicative of maybe your hormone. For my, for example, for me, my hormones were out of whack. My adrenals were messed up, and I didn't want to admit there was something wrong with me. That was a huge problem, and I didn't want them to know it, and I didn't want anybody to know it. You hear my dog? I'm
Oh, that's your
sorry. That's
dog.
my dog
That's
walking.
okay.
It's my dog walking around, and she doesn't know how to lie down without kind of going, ugh. No, no, that's her.
Oh, that's so cute. Well, so you, I mean, I have to say, reading this book was both really enlightening and really painful because I do think it's universal. Immediately as I read it, I thought back to things that, I was ashamed of or things that I thought had to be a secret. And so what I love about this book is that when your friends were reaching out to you, I was like, just tell them what's going on with you. But really, I'm saying that to myself, to my adolescent self, who couldn't always share the shameful secrets either.
Right. I think that's a real process of evolution, to share, to be part of the world and to offer ourselves to the world and to share ourselves with the world, to share our concerns, our fears, even our happiness is a terrifying thing because what if? There's the what ifs. How are people going to respond? What will people say? What will people do? Will they leave me? I mean, there's that fear, and I think adolescence is such a tricky, difficult, hard time. I mean, I think about when my son is an adolescent. It's like, oh boy, maybe we could just skip those years. But I imagine I can't do that. But it's really hard. It's really hard to share yourself with the world and to open up. And so when I wrote this book, that was my goal. I wanted to open up to the world.
Right. And I would say just from reading the book and the little bit that I've been getting to know you, you have really taken an incredible journey in terms of both being vulnerable and accepting yourself. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, was there a turning point or how did that happen for you?
I think a huge turning point was meeting my husband. My husband is somebody who is an incredibly accepting person and who also, as I talk about in the book, has something different about him too, which is that he has a higher than normal voice for a man. And
Right.
so it's challenging for him. I'm sorry if you hear my dog again. It's challenging for him, but he learned a long time ago to say, I don't care. I don't care this, it's not an I don't care in a defiant way. It's I don't care because I like myself. And that was a huge
Mm,
turning point. When I met him, I was 28. And I would say up until that point, I'm not sure how I really accepted myself. I think that I did to a degree. I've always had a bit of confidence. I didn't walk around in the world like an Eeyore. I really had confidence and I've always liked myself. It wasn't about how I felt about myself. It was about how I thought other people would feel about me. But when I met Adam, I just saw how he reacted to me and he just genuinely liked me and was so accepting of me. And in this very, very natural way that kind of blew my mind.
right, right. Do you think he is the first person that even before your very close female friends that you were able to open up and talk openly about this condition with?
He is the first. Absolutely. He was the first person to ever hear the stories. I told him about getting laser hair removal right before I went to Venice, Italy, and how that was just so painful and so scary. And I couldn't look at him when I told him that story. I was sobbing and I couldn't look at him. And I said, I have to tell you something. I had an experience, something happened to me. I have to tell you something. And when I told him about that, it was obvious that then I would have to tell him about, well, this is what's wrong with me. I mean, we were already dating at that point. We were already together. And I had not yet told
Mhm.
him, look, this is the condition that I have. But that said, I actually didn't even know the name of what was wrong with me. I knew that I had something called hirsutism, and that was it. I didn't know I had congenital adrenal hyperplasia. I didn't understand that I was not alone. But he was the first person who I ever spoke a word about with it because he never asked me. He never said, "What's wrong with you?" I went to him and I said, "This is what's wrong with me." And it was because I was so comfortable and confident with him.
Well, I was going to ask, how did that feel for you once you had finally shared that with someone?
Oh, it was an incredible catharsis. It was a revolution. The idea of being able to share, the idea of being open and of speaking the truth, which is what all, if there's one thing I want to do with my art, that's what I want to do. I want to be candid. I want to speak the truth. I want to say what really goes on. And it revolutionized me in my work and in my life. And it was amazing. And that said, it was terrifying. I was terrified afterwards. Is he going to leave me? Is this something he can't handle? And that was never the case. That was just never the case.
Well, that is the interesting thing about something that we're ashamed of. It just so often is not, that shame is so personal, is what I'm trying to say, is that it's not, of course, he wasn't going to leave you, but that's what it feels like when you carry a secret that you're very ashamed of. It feels enormous, and it feels like it completely shapes who you believe that you are in a way.
Oh, 100%. 100%. It shapes who you are, how you react, what you do not do, what you shy away from, what scares you. And when you lift that boulder off your chest, it changes everything. And if that's the story that I tell to people, if that's the message that they get, then I'll have been able to communicate something to them.
Right, right. Well, that was going to be my next question, is that what do you hope that readers will take away from this book?
I want people to know that what makes us weird also unites us. It's the kind of thing where we all have something. And I've sat in cafes many times with friends and said, look around, everybody's got something. They may not seem like it. They may just be sitting there drinking their overpriced lattes, just like I am, but they've got something. And, in turn, I've been told, well, you always seem confident. You never seemed like it bothered you. And it's like, wow, I was able to hide it just as much as everybody else. But I want people to know they're not alone. I mean, it's not a feel good story, but it is almost like an assurance. Like, you're not alone. You may not share my particular condition, but I know you have something and I have something. And maybe there's a kindness that can be born of that.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize that last point about that kindness. I think you're right. You don't read this story and think, oh, this is a great story of, Allison's life. That's not how you feel, but it touched me so deeply. And it was a cathartic thing to read for myself as well, which is always a really wonderful feeling when you read something like that.
Oh, thank you for saying that. And I'm really glad because that's what I want it to be for people. I want people to walk away saying, gosh, I never realized I could feel this way. I
Mm.
never realized I could actually say the truth. I mean, there's so much about the way we live in this world, particularly I think as Americans. If you ask us how we're doing, we say, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm great." I lived for 6 months in the Czech Republic, and that was not how they are. If you ask a Czech person how they're doing, they'll tell you the truth. They'll
Wow.
say, "I yeah, špatně, bad, bad." They'll always say špatně, and I kind of appreciated that. There are times that we're špatně. There are times that we're not doing well,
Right.
and I think if that were more put out into the world, then maybe we would feel less alone.
Yeah. That is such a great takeaway from this. Well, I'm wondering if you could read an excerpt from your book.
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and find that. The worst part about being different isn't the ridicule. Hell, you expect that. You don't like it, but it's part of the package. A shitty part, granted, the fruitcake at Christmas. But you make your peace, develop your coping mechanisms. You hire a therapist or six, run on the treadmill until your feet feel ready to drop from the rest of your body. Maybe you stand in front of the refrigerator and eat past the point of satiation, push past into that queasy country where food is not a bodily necessity, but something to defeat. Could be you stick something in your arm or your nose, or you find the same stranger in different bars in different cities. The same stranger with varying bodies and accents and ways of saying, let's go back to yours. And you wake up empty when you want it to be full. Or you dig your nails into your arm until it bleeds, trap the inside of your cheek with your teeth, holding just past the point of pain. You release and repeat. You get by. You make do. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is people who think they're on your side. The woman who slides next to you onto a bench at a cafe. I need to talk to you. It's about your health. My electrologist friend at the Isla Vista Co-op. The stoned theater director at a party crowing, it's the media. They tell us who's beautiful and who's not. They pressure us. They shove their concepts down our throats. I've heard plenty about the media and their ideas of beauty. I'll tell you this. The media never put a razor in my hand and said, use it. No billboard or television show, no music video or magazine ad twisted my arm behind my back and said, make a change. I did it myself.
That passage was so powerful when I read it because I think I spent a lot of your book really blaming your parents. And there was something about reading that passage which made me think, oh, wait, in order to make a change, we have to start with our own behavior and what our choices have been.
Agreed. I mean, that my husband and I were talking in a different way about that the other day. We were talking about money, and I've managed to improve my credit, and I'm very happy about this. And I was saying, it was my doing. It was my doing. And I think that there's a lot of responsibility that I take in terms of this condition. Yes, I was born with it. Yes, I didn't have the supports. But when it came to it, I had to recognize it and deal with it. And it took a long time. And I think it's a life's work to recognize and deal with who we are. But I think it's the best kind of work you can do.
That is a beautiful thought to end on. So, Allison, tell me where people can find your book.
Well, they can go to the Woodhull Press website and search for it there. It's also on Amazon. And it's also, if you go to bookshop.org and just look for it there. Or just Google it. There's a lot of places it comes up. I'm Target of all things. So I'm very surprised to find it on the Target website. So there's a lot of different places. And if you Google it, you'll find it.
That's wonderful. And do you have a website that they can visit?
Absolutely. It's AllisonLanda.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today and talking about your book.
Thank you, Pam. It's been a pleasure.
You're listening to Art Heals All Wounds. A huge thanks to Allison Landa for sharing her work and her insights from her new memoir, Bearded Lady. I learned so much from reading this book about Allison, yes, but about myself as well. Bearded Lady is published by Woodhull Press and is available to order. Just Google it and you'll find it. I highly recommend this read for anyone looking to lose their shame from secrets that they've been carrying around for too long. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Art Heals All Wounds. If you value meeting these artists and hearing about their work in this podcast, help support us by sharing this episode. The music you've heard in this podcast is by Ketsa and Lobo Loco. This podcast was edited by Eva Hristova. Art Heals All Wounds comes to you from Oakland, California, on unceded territory of the Choqueño Ohlone people.
Dear Reframables, welcome to our podcast.
I'm Nat.
And I'm Beck.
Two very different sisters who try to reorient life through the stories we tell.
We call it reframing.
Sometimes we do it through conversations, just the two of us.
And sometimes we bring in artists, thinkers, and creators to help us along.
Always, we like to leave you with some new reframable to chew on
as we work through life's big and small stuff together.